Hello, everybody. Frank Kenny here again with another chamber interview. Today, we are very fortunate to be interviewing one of the top people in recruitment for the top chamber jobs in the country. I have Eric Peterson with me from Waverly Partners. Hello, Eric. How are you?
Hey Frank, I'm terrific, thank you.
Good. Let me introduce you for the people that don't happen to know you. I'm going to be reading my screen here, but Eric Peterson is Managing Director and Principal of Waverly Partners, LLC, and is based in Cleveland, Ohio. Waverly Partners is a national retained executive search firm with offices in Atlanta, Charleston, Charlotte, Cleveland, Columbus, Kansas, Louisville, Pittsburgh, Toledo. So this is a serious firm. It was founded in 2001 and provides outstanding service to clients in multiple industries across the country. Eric has 25 years of executive search consulting experience with successful track record, top and senior leaders of executive management, finance, info systems, operations, sales. It goes on and on, but I'll just follow or end this with he has his bachelor's degree in English from Denison, master's of business in finance from Xavier. He's a member of, and I could list several boards. I just really appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge with us here today, Eric.
Well, thanks Frank, I really appreciate you having me on.
How much of your focus is on chambers versus other industries?
I spend, I would say probably 65% of my time working on behalf of chamber organizations. I often include other member-based organizations. I've done some work for associations, economic development organizations that all kind of typically have the same kinds of member businesses that are members of these organizations.
But you definitely have a focus in the Chamber of Commerce industry.
Correct.
And this is you're kind of a sweet spot for you, I sense.
And you may have said this, I don't think you did, Frank, that our firm, Waverly Partners, has had the opportunity to work with enough chambers around the country that several years ago we were selected by the American Chamber of Commerce executives to be its preferred provider of executive search. It doesn't mean we do every chamber search around the country, of course, but it's kind of our good housekeeping seal of approval. We're really privileged to have that recognition by ACCE, and we work really hard to make sure we maintain that.
Yeah, and I've seen your name bantered about for years with ACCE, and I finally met you face to face at the conference in Oklahoma, I think it was.
It was.
Yeah, very good. Well, let's jump into this on ways that you're able to help chamber executives and chambers with this executive recruitment. And I guess my first question here is, let me go back to my notes. And for a chamber executive, somebody that wants to build a successful career in the Chamber of Commerce industry, what kind of services can you provide or advice can you give them on how to maybe work with you or how to structure their career to be successful?
One of the things, Frank, that is the first thing that I would say to anyone who is in the chamber profession who would call me and ask me something like, can you help me get my next job? My first reaction, candidly, is probably not, because here's why. Ultimately, Waverly Partners represents the interests of the chamber organization that's seeking to fill the position. And I guess I would also just say, I call myself a headhunter. Most people understand that phrase, and I'm not offended by it. It's easier to say than executive search consultant. But as a headhunter, while we represent the interests of the chamber, of course, the chamber is asking us to go find candidates or identify candidates or talk to people who are in leadership positions. So we play, as search consultants, a pretty delicate role of communicating with and really representing the interests of the chamber, but at the same time, to a large degree, representing the interests of candidates as well. So if an individual were to call and say, can you help me? First off, if I'm currently working on an assignment for a top chamber position, and most of the work that I do for chambers tends to be the CEO position, executive director, president, CEO, whatever the title may be. Occasionally we'll do some vice president level positions, and most often for chambers that are a fairly decent size. But I'm always willing to talk to chamber leaders, whether they're in a small suburban chamber or a mid-sized metro or certainly a larger organization. So part of our commitment to ACCE is to help advance the profession. And so being able to talk to people, no matter where they are in their career, I'm always happy to do that. So if someone were to call me, one of the first things I would ask them is to get a copy of a resume to me, and we'll maybe talk about resumes a little bit, and want to just have an informal telephone call about the career path they've had to date, the kind of work experience that they've had, a little bit about the chamber organization that they've been part of, perhaps some of the specific responsibilities and accomplishments they've had while in that role, and then just to understand what they're interested in. Do they want to be, if they're at a staff level role, are they looking to be in a management role? If they're at a senior management role, do they want to be the CEO? And just understanding a little bit about kind of their credentials and career interest.
What do you think the potential is in the Chamber of Commerce industry, maybe with the baby boomers exiting and a lot of vacancies? I mean, it seems like if this could be a viable career for somebody that is truly passionate about the industry.
That's certainly the case. We've seen, as a firm, Waverly Partners has seen, not just within chambers, but certainly in lots of other industries, sort of that the early baby boomer folks are now at that retirement age, some of whom, including some chamber leaders who perhaps chose to delay retirement for a few years, when the economy was not as strong, and now that 401k balances are looking a little more robust, perhaps they're willing to retire and be off to their next thing. I think the profession is an exciting one. I think that it's a great opportunity for people who like policy work, like working with businesses, like advocacy, like community service and community development, kind of wraps all of that together. I think the large question for people who are interested in committing to the chamber profession is their willingness to move around geographically, because while certainly there are a number of chamber leaders who have succeeded in remaining in their organization and kind of moving up the ranks, the odds are that if an individual is interested in moving from one kind of chamber leadership position to another, they're probably going to need to think about relocating. There's a lot that goes into that, of course, relative to family, real estate, and a lot of other factors, but that's really often how things go. And most often when a chamber asks Waverly Partners to conduct a search, they really are looking for us to really do a national search, knowing that chamber leaders do tend to move around.
Right. And if somebody is currently employed with a chamber, but they have higher aspirations, there's no harm in giving you a call and getting on your radar. That's not, I'm trying to think of the integrity here of the vice president of an organization where they're happy, everybody likes them, but they also have to consider their own career. So there's a pretty thing there, isn't there?
I guess I'd say this, certainly, again, because we represent the interests of the chamber, we're not actively out helping people find their next role. But because of the work we do at chambers, I'm really always happy to talk to people at various points in their career. I think that, of course, if people didn't move around in jobs, I wouldn't have anything to do. So I need people to sort of exit their roles and go on to do other things. Now, one of the things that we do as a firm, if we help recruit an individual to an organization, we do not ever pluck them out and try to recruit them somewhere else. Because, again, we represent the chamber client, not the person. But, there are a number of firms that do this kind of work that we do, who focus in economic development and chamber of commerce work around the country. But there are also a lot of local firms, search firms, that perhaps a chamber, instead of engaging Waverly Partners, might pick a local recruiting or executive search firm that might be a member of their local chamber to do the search. So a lot of times I'll get calls from chamber leaders wanting to know about a certain search assignment. Our firm may not be doing that search, but I can often give them some informal advice and counsel as they think about the opportunity.
Very good. If a person today is thinking that they don't really need to work on their resume so much anymore because they have a LinkedIn profile, which is basically a resume, and they have a great social media presence, well, maybe you can just tell me kind of what is the role of the resume today and social media?
It really, Frank, is an absolute combination. I think that the resume allows a candidate to put some very specific information about their organization, their specific accomplishments. They can even tailor-make a resume based upon the opportunity they're pursuing. I think LinkedIn is clearly a very important avenue for which people should have information about their overall career. But you don't want LinkedIn to look like your resume. You want it to be a little more focused on kind of just the facts, and perhaps not the same level of appropriate professional embellishment that a resume naturally would include. So I think when I talk to people today about their career information that's sort of out there, they definitely want to have an accurate, up-to-date, and effective LinkedIn profile. It also allows you, LinkedIn, I believe, also allows you a chance to perhaps put a little bit more personal information or about how people like to spend some of their off hours. I think LinkedIn is an appropriate avenue for that. Resumes, not so much. I would also say on the resume side that you want to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is referenced on the resume, because one of the first things that I do if I get an inquiry from someone, if Frank Kenny from XYZ Chamber of Commerce leaves me a voicemail about an opportunity that our firm is representing, the first thing I'm going to do is go to LinkedIn and see if I can pull up Frank Kenny's background and learn a little bit about his experience before I would even pick up the phone and return the call. So you want to make sure that LinkedIn is fairly up to date and accurate. But at the same time, if I talk to Frank on the phone, I absolutely want to see a copy of Frank's resume because I'm interested in his overall career history, academic background, the path he's taken, some of the experiences and accomplishments that he's had. So you really need both.
You need both. Interesting. So let's say that I am open to relocating, I'm open to taking on more responsibility, and I get a call from Waverly Partners, and it's interesting to me, the opportunity. And let's say that the organization that you're representing wants to talk to me and see if this is going to go any further. Can you share kind of what I can expect as this gets more serious?
Yeah, I think from a process standpoint that Waverly Partners and most executive search firms, we are a little bit of the gatekeeper. Again, that's why the chamber is engaging us. It's to do a couple things. One is to cast the net, try to identify people who they normally wouldn't find on their own. And there's some of that, but at the same time, part of our role is also to evaluate and assess the skill sets and experience of potential candidates as they match up with what the organization is looking for. And the other part of my role is also to be a little bit of a cheerleader and a sales guy on behalf of the chamber and the community that we're representing. So typically, if you and I would have some initial phone dialogue, I would get a copy of your resume from you, we'd have a phone discussion. I would have that with a number of people. I would reconvene with the search committee of the Chamber's board of directors and share with them, well, here's some information about Frank Kenny and about Betsy Smith and Johnny Jones. And at that point, the committee would give me the green light because they're interested in Frank as a potential candidate. I would then want to meet with you, Frank, on a face-to-face basis, either like we're doing today via the magic of video conference, or more often than not, face-to-face, just so we could shake hands and have some direct conversation. And I will do that with a number of individuals, provide some more detail back to the search committee about you based on your career path, how you work with boards, raise money, deal with elected officials, manage individuals, all the things that are important in being a chamber exec. I provide that information back to the search committee. They would then say, Frank, we'd like to invite you to meet with us in our community. We'll often do that not at the chamber, but off-site, in part just for confidentiality reasons. We typically would include a chance for you to tour the community if you haven't had a chance to see it yet. And then I'm normally in the room with the search committee. I don't participate. I'm just helping the search committee kind of go through some of its questions of you. After that visit, if you like what you've heard from the committee and what you've seen of the community, and they like what they've heard from you, they will typically ask me then to talk to some professional references, which is a very important part of the process. I want to talk to some of the staff who work for you or may have worked for you in the past, board members, community leaders, some other economic development partners you may have worked with, just to get an overall sense of your background and are you really who you say you are in terms of some of the skill sets and backgrounds. The committee would then invite you back for a second visit, and if you're married, have a significant other, you bring those folks back, spend more time in the community, and then engage with the committee, probably a larger complement of the board. That's often also the point in time where we would have you as a candidate meet with some of the chamber staff, just because they don't get a vote in deciding who their next boss will be, but they do have some level of influence, and obviously you're not going to be able to be successful running the chamber without them. So you want to get to meet them and learn a little bit about their backgrounds. And then we often encourage our search committees to invite other community people who might be engaged in working with the chamber. Again, elected officials, the head of United Way, if there's a standalone economic development organization or CVB, some of those folks, university presidents or community college leaders, just so you as a potential candidate get to meet all these folks you're going to be working with on a regular basis once you run the chamber. So it's a thorough process. I think it sometimes tends to take a little bit longer than perhaps all of us would prefer, you as a candidate as well as the search committee. But as I remind the committee and candidates and boards, this is the most important decision that a board will make. It's the hiring of their next CEO, and as a result, you want to make sure that you are very thorough in the process and that everyone's going to make the right and the correct decision.
Yeah, very good. What about certain skill sets that you find that chamber execs absolutely must possess in order to reach a major metropolitan level chamber executive position?
There are a couple of things that are both sort of the tangibles and intangibles, Frank. And I think these are universally true, whether you are looking for someone leading a large metro or even, a small suburban with just a couple of staff. And I often cite these to search committees. I think number one is integrity, and we'll want to have seen how you have demonstrated integrity. Have there been a difficult situation? How do you handle it? Has there been an employee issue, and how have you chosen to go about the process of exiting that person out of the organization? And so, as we all know, representing a chamber, you're representing the interests of all your members. There's a transparency involved, particularly if there's funding that's coming in from members or public funds. So sort of that integrity, transparency, ethics is really critical. I think a second piece of that is the leadership responsibility, and a lot of that is some of the basic, I have managed people, I have managed budgets, I've managed organizations, as well as the kind of leadership that's required to convince people that you've got a great idea and you can lead a strategy and you can take an organization and a community to new heights. So sort of the leadership piece, and some of that is very demonstrated by experience. Just a side comment, occasionally we will have candidates for chamber leadership positions who have come from private sector, as many people have, but some of them have been from, let's say, political advocacy kind of positions, lobbyists, but often they've not had the staff management responsibility, and that's often been a little bit of a challenge to suddenly step into a job where they've got 15, 20 people. So integrity, leadership, and then the third thing is what I just call sales, because this really is a selling job. You are trying to sell people to join your chamber. You're trying to sell people to stay a member. You're trying to, in effect, sell public officials on the concept of devoting some of their resources or negating a tax proposal or those kinds of things. You're trying to sell the staff to kind of move forward. You're trying to sell the board. So that sort of ability to convince and engage people. And all those things are, what's interesting about all three of them, well, the integrity is pretty much cast in concrete, but leaders are very different in terms of how they manage people, how they lead organizations. People have quiet sales skills. There are other folks who are much more brash and outgoing and assertive. So I think it all depends. At the end of the day, what I often find is that organizations like chambers, it's not so much a question of can we find someone to do the job. It's really what's also going to fit best for our organization and our community. So it's a little bit of kind of the art of experience and then the chemistry of personality in order for it to work out.
Well, thank you so much for all this information. It's going to be very valuable. Let me wrap this up with to see if you know of any stories of a chamber professional that was maybe running a smaller chamber, and sometimes it can be intimidating when you compare your small or medium chamber to some of these major metros. Is there hope for somebody running a small chamber to, within a few years of maybe professional development or successful leadership, to be running a major metropolitan?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably an interim step in between. I mean, it's probably not as likely that, a person that has, been running a 3-person shop is, suddenly going to go up to a community of 800,000 people and a 25-employee staff and so on. But I would say a couple things. I've often said to individuals who lead the large metros, it's almost easier for them to hide in their community than it is if you are, the CEO of a small chamber in a smaller community where everybody knows who you are. And that's even almost more of a challenging job to some degree than being in the large metro. I think a couple things. I think the folks that I've had the chance to engage with or talk with in this profession have committed to it as a profession, that they've been engaged as, in terms of pursuing things like institute or their CCE designation. They've been involved at their state chamber association. They've made sure they've connected to people, Frank, like you, who kind of see a lot of other chambers and just kind of hear what's going on, what some of the best practices are. So I think like any other profession, you have to kind of make the commitment to it. And then I think you have a willingness to take a risk and perhaps go other places. You know, it's going to require in all likelihood that you'll have to leave one job to go to the next, And you know, some people just don't want to do that because of their love of their community, their family circumstance, a lot of other things. So I think there's definitely a lot of room for opportunity. I think there's also room for opportunity who are not yet at the CEO level, people that are vice presidents, senior vice presidents, again, going to your earlier point of some of the transitions in the chamber profession, of people who are going to be retiring in the next year or 2 years. I think there would be a lot of openings. And if chamber professionals are not willing to relocate, then the chamber boards will just need to find people more at the local business level to step in. And some chambers have certainly historically done that and are doing that. Frank, you may or may not ask me, but I'm going to mention this because this is my chance to plug. A lot of the things that I've talked about, several years ago, the folks at ACCE asked me to write a book specifically for people that are in the chamber profession about career development. And so if people want to buy the book, I get like $2.50 every time one is sold. So it's not like I'm going to make a lot of money on this. But it is available on the ACC website, and we are in process of trying to create more of an ebook because, candidly, it was written about 6 years ago before a lot of the advent of LinkedIn and some other social media opportunities. So it's called Career Building for the Chamber Professional. You may want to take a look at it. It's got a lot of the things that I've mentioned this afternoon and probably a lot more that could help you if you do choose to embark on the path of looking for your next chamber position.
Well, I sure appreciate you telling the world about your book. Very good. I'm glad you did that. And thank you so much for coming on the interview. How can people get in touch with you? Email or phone number? What would you prefer?
Yeah, our firm's website is Waverly. It's W-A-V as in Victor, E-R-L-Y, and then a hyphen, a dash, and then partners.com. Or my email is my first initial E, my last name Peterson, which is Peter like the boy, S-O-N, and then at Waverly-partners.com. ePeterson at Waverly-partners.com. It's probably the simplest way to track me down.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on, and you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Frank. I really appreciate it. Best wishes.
All right. Bye-bye.